RMT with this strike just announced in the past few minutes on the 8th of October. Good luck, everybody.
Just very lastly, Simon, thank you for your time on this one then. So if the productivity appears to be down and the revenue appears to be down, then isn't it just natural basic economics that we can't offer a pay rise to people in line with inflation? Is it just tough titty?
Well, look, the government, of course, is throwing money at lots of things at the moment. The unions are betting that if they keep the pressure up, then the government will cave in and start throwing money at the railways. However, I sense that the government is prepared to sort of make a stand on this. That's why we've not seen the train operators settle, because ultimately, I mean, Labour keeps calling for nationalisation of the trains. Well, everyone knows they are really in the government's control once again. And the unions are kind of almost, back where they were in the 80s when they were winning strikes. They were shutting down the nation. The difference is, of course, that although commuters from Woking, from Winchester, from Windsor aren't necessarily particularly put out when you have these strikes, which is why they are going for Saturdays, because those are the days of the week when you're seeing actually the most travellers, because that's the leisure travellers that everybody needs in order to keep the railways going, and they're exactly the people who are caught up in the middle of this awful row.
Simon, great stuff. Thank you very much. Travel editor for The Independent, Simon Calder at Charing Cross Station, reacting to that breaking news of fresh rail strikes. Well, look, we've got loads coming your way today. Extra police officers have now been drafted in to prevent a repeat of those clashes that we've seen between Muslims and Hindu groups in Leicester, in parts of Birmingham as well. Will this spread across the Midlands, across the country? Who knows? How real is the threat that this could happen all over again? And keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Loads of reaction to this new GP appointment announcement. Some horror stories coming in from you as well. We're going to put some of those to medical professionals, people saying they've struggled to get an appointment for a long time, and including as well one here from Len. He says, I never thought I'd say this, maybe it's time to wind up the NHS completely. Drastic stuff, Len. gbviews at gbnews.uk. We're back in a tick.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25% as it seeks to curb soaring prices. The rate has been lifted by half a percentage point from 1.75% and takes borrowing costs to their highest levels since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of England now expects a 0.1% fall in GDP over the current quarter, indicating it believes the country is already in recession. The Chancellor has announced the rise in national insurance implemented under Boris Johnson is to be cancelled later this year. The increase of 1.25%, which came into force in April, will be reversed this November. In a tweet, Kwasi Kwarteng called the measure a tax cut for workers. The government has unveiled a £500 million fund for NHS winter care. Under the reforms, the Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, has pledged patients with urgent needs will be able to see a GP on the same day. Those who want to book non-urgent appointments will be seen by a doctor within 2 weeks. The government has lifted a ban on fracking in England in a bid to provide what it's calling energy security for the UK. Fracking's a way of mining gas and oil from shale rock, which experts warn could cause earthquakes. Unveiling the measures earlier, Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg said the government needs to pursue all avenues to provide domestic energy supply. But the Shadow Secretary for Climate Change, Ed Miliband, says the move tears up a Tory manifesto commitment. And the RMT union has announced another rail strike next month. Over 40,000 workers from Network Rail and 15 train companies will walk out on the 8th of October. It's part of a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and working conditions. Strikes are already set to go ahead on October the 1st and 5th. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.126 and €1.144 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,486 and 84 pence per ounce.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, this was a hot topic yesterday, and it's going to rumble on today as well, because extra police officers are being brought to Leicester to prevent a repeat of that inter-community violence which erupted last weekend. So the region's police and crime commissioner says that this weekend, neighbouring forces are providing additional officers. This follows violent clashes between Muslims and Hindus in the city, and they've also spread almost 50 miles to Smethwick in the West Midlands. Serious concerns they could spread not just right across the Midlands, but potentially across the country as well. We're going to be returning to this throughout a bit later on in the show as well, just to ask what really is going on here. Is multiculturalism working? How can we get integration right? And frankly, how do we stop this absolute madness? But as our Home and Security Editor Mark White reports, some in the community are blaming a new wave of migrants from the Indian subcontinent for fueling the violence between sections of the Muslim and the Hindu communities.
On Belgrave Road in Leicester, the scene of so much of the violence in recent days, it's peaceful now. The predominantly Hindu community is preparing for the annual Diwali festival next month. But for now, locals like Rakan Chudasama, who's run a retail business here for 20 years, is more concerned about the next few days, fearing the possibility of renewed trouble here.
It's minority. who is causing the problem. I mean, Hindus and Muslims, end of the day, we are all one. So I don't see why they should be fighting.
Last weekend's violence here stretched local policing resources beyond breaking point. Senior officers had to call on mutual aid from neighbouring forces to help bring order back to the community. The area's Police and Crime Commissioner says reinforcements will be in place in the days ahead should trouble flare again.
Some of the officers are beginning to get tired, that they're needing to take rests. But the neighbouring police forces have been absolutely wonderful. They have not stinted in sending us additional officers, together with all the equipment that they need. So yeah, absolutely, there will be enough police officers out there to cope with whatever comes.
The violence here between young Hindu and Muslim men flared up after a cricket match between India and Pakistan on the 28th of August. Both sides, of course, blame each other, and social media has only intensified the anger and unrest. The violence here is a huge blow to Leicester's reputation as one of the country's most ethnically diverse, yet largely harmonious communities. A city that has always proudly boasted of its multicultural heritage. Suleiman Nagdi from the Federation of Muslim Organisations in Leicester believes a recent surge in immigrants from the subcontinent has added to the volatility within settled and, to an extent, integrated communities here.
In recent years, we've had a new migration that's come in over the last 4 or 5 years. Now, I don't wish to stereotype a particular section of the community, but that community came from a different background, and therefore their understanding and the norms of British society may be different to that of mine. And I think we have not built the bridge between that community and ourselves, and hence I think the problem lies at every section of society.
Despite the calls for calm, it's clear that below the surface there are those prepared to exploit ancient animosities and import the kind of interfaith intolerance that has so divided much of the Indian subcontinent. Mark White, GB News, Leicester.
Well, lots to get stuck into on that very topic, as essentially race relations are under the microscope yet again in the Midlands. And we're going to be getting stuck right into that. We're going to be talking about whether or not you can have a truly cohesive society whilst we have such high levels of immigration from people from vastly different cultures. Are going to be talking about that. We're also going to be having a conversation with two faith leaders, one from the Christian sects, as it were, and one from the Muslim side of things, just to talk about whether or not actually maybe religion is the problem. Maybe actually religious tensions are to blame. You very rarely see disputes between atheists on the streets, do you? What do you make of all of that? I want to hear from you. GBViews at GBNews.uk. But on another big social call out I've been talking to you about today, and thank you because you've responded in your droves. Lots of you getting in touch with your thoughts on the state of our NHS. The big announcement today, was that basically our new Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, is trying to make sure that you, me, everyone that we know can get a GP's appointment in the same day if it's urgent enough, and within 2 weeks if it's frankly any other appointment. Looking to reduce ambulance times, looking to see increased use of pharmacies, etc., to try to soften the burden on GPs. But I wanted to hear from you because later on in the show we're going to be talking to a lot of medical professionals, and it's nice to put some of your views to them, some of your experiences to them. Sometimes they try to hide behind spreadsheets, don't they? But they can't hide behind you. People like Kate. I do not recognise this picture the media paint of an overstretched and inefficient GP service. Even through the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, I've always been able to get appointments, as have friends and family at different surgeries. Good stuff. Good for you, Kate, I must say, because it is a different picture with a lot of other people, but thank you. She says, last week I was taken very ill and was seen on an emergency appointment. She goes on for quite a while there, to be fair. But, Kate, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Does that indicate it's a bit of a postcode lottery, maybe? Joy says, the problem with the NHS is there are not enough doctors. This is mainly due to the UK universities restricting the number of UK students they enrol each year. Yes, maybe a recruitment crisis there. Dan says, never thought I'd hear myself say this, but I think the best thing for the NHS now is to just wind it up and shut it down. The only other way to make it more effective is to scrap some services like cosmetic surgery and nurses teaching basic healthcare in schools, to name a few. We need to roll it back to what it was designed for, Raymond says, firstly, if doctors qualify in this country, they should legally be committed to the NHS for a set number of years. Raymond here touching on a point that I know a lot of you have been getting onto. Someone else was saying as well, how can we get burnt-out GPs when they're working privately a couple of days a week, etc.? Do you think that maybe that's a solution, just to, I suppose, trap them in the NHS, which is essentially what Raymond is saying there? Will that actually work, or will that just lead to even fewer recruits? There's no quick fix here, but thank you for all of your views there. I do want some of your actual experiences in terms of being able to get an appointment or not. Maybe we can try and paint a bit of a map of the UK and see where it's good and where it's bad. And also, as well, we can put some of your views as well to actual medical professionals to see if they can justify it. But coming up, more than 1,000 people have been arrested in anti-war protests in Russia after President Putin ordered the country's first military draft since the Second World War. There appears to have been a bit of an exodus at the airports as well. Flights out of the country are full. We'll get the latest and ask what it means for Putin's war efforts. Are the Russians rising up? I will be back in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Shortly, I'll be addressing an extremely contentious issue. That's right, fracking is back on the menu. Frankly, there is only one question in town as far as I'm concerned. Will fracking cause earthquakes? Because if it doesn't, then let's just get on with it, frankly. If the answer to that question is no, what is the problem? I want to debate that in a few moments, because if it means that we can be self-sufficient, essentially, and our bills all come down, then what's the problem? But I suppose if it does mean that Yorkshire sinks into the ground, then we do have an issue on our hands. But first, 5 Britons captured in Ukraine by pro-Russian forces have returned to the UK after their release was secured by working with Ukrainian authorities and, bizarrely, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Yeah, I know. It is understood that John Harding, Dylan Healy and Andrew Hill were set free alongside Sean Pinner and Aidan Aslin on Wednesday, and they landed in Britain in the early hours of Thursday morning. Meanwhile, in Russia, there's reports that Russian police have arrested hundreds and hundreds of protesters rallying against the Kremlin's decision to call up thousands of extra troops to fight in Ukraine. Well, Russia's president ordered a partial mobilisation, meaning some 300,000 military reservists, but not conscripts, will be drafted to bolster Russia's forces, who suffered recent battlefield reverses, frankly. They've gone into full reverse, haven't they, in Ukraine? Well, I'm joined now by former British Army Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Good stuff, Hamish. Thank you very much for joining us here. Are the Russians rising up?
Pleasure. Well, I think it's showing what a desperate situation this is. Your point about the hostages being returned, the prisoners being returned, that's really good news. That's about the only good news we've seen coming out of Ukraine and Russia recently. But the mobilization of 300,000 ostensibly young fighting-age males in Russia is almost state-sponsored homicide. These young kids, again, get a day or two's training, given a rifle, and put in the trenches. They're fighting well-trained, highly motivated, highly capable forces in Ukraine. You know, even the basic Ukrainian troops who come to the UK to be trained have a month's training before going into the front line. So it's absolutely desperate. You know, the Russians claim they've lost 5,000 troops killed in this war. It's officially been designated of about 50,000. The reality is it's probably nearer 100,000. So to try and grab people off the streets, and as your pictures are showing, these are not willing volunteers. And from my 30 years fighting in battlefields, you really need to want to do it to be successful. If you're being dragged there, you haven't a hope.
A Ukrainian politician tweeted something the other day, which I thought was quite interesting. It just said more Russian troops equals more dead Russians. Is that true?
Absolutely right. I mean, it does sound very callous. And it's dreadful talking about human beings in this way, which is why, you know, we must try and make sure that this doesn't happen. Because those young boys being dragged off the streets, are they going to be put in the front line? It's a bit like the First World War, you know, in battles of Ypres and Passchendaele, where tens, if not hundreds of thousands of young men walked into bullets to their deaths. And this is what we're going to see with these Russian kids, because they will stand no chance against the weaponry in the fight of the Ukrainians, and of course the advanced weaponry that we're giving them as well. You know, and with yesterday also Putin and Markov and Medvedev threatening us with nuclear attack, just shows how absolutely desperate they are. And Putin's walls seem to be crumbling. Let's hope there are a few sane people in the Kremlin at the moment, and will remove him from power. And I expect more importantly, or more likely, the Russian people, who, as you say, are now rising up, the sort of protests we've never seen before. Hopefully they're the people who are going to bring Putin down and get some sort of peace in Ukraine, rather than this carnage which is going to unfold, I'm sure, over the next couple of months, if nothing else happens.
I'm going to return to the protests in Russia a bit later on. I want to get you as a military perspective, really, on this. And some people will say that the return of hostages, or captives, as it were, these British chaps that have now come home, and some videos circulating online, I'm sure people have seen them, of supposedly Ukrainian soldiers with suspiciously American accents, for example. Have foreign forces not just been giving the Ukrainian army weapons, but also personnel as well? Because if that is the case, then it's not just Ukrainians fighting the Russians, is it?
Well, I think we have to be very careful here. Absolutely, the international community, NATO and the UK in particular, have given the Ukrainians a hell of a lot of advice, a hell of a lot of equipment, and a hell of a lot of intelligence, which has allowed them to defeat the Russians' conventional forces. When it comes to foreigners, if you like, fighting for the Ukraine, absolutely, there are lots of people who have gone to Ukraine to create these sort of foreign legions that are fighting there. As some people have suggested, are there British or American troops fighting there? Absolutely not. I would be, in fact, I'm convinced that there would be no official British and American troops fighting there. Are there British and American citizens fighting there? Absolutely there are.
Good stuff. Important distinction, that, I think. Thank you very much. Former British Army Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. We're moving away from Russia now, and something a lot closer to home, but could it be equally as explosive? Well, not quite. Earlier today, the government decided to lift the UK's ban on fracking, which has been in place since 2019. Now, the moratorium was put in place after what some call minor tremors, but the Business Secretary says the government is pushing ahead with fracking anyway, drilling for our own shale gas resources instead of relying on Russian gas. So Jacob Rees-Mogg addressed the House of Commons earlier on.
That this is in the national interest, will make the country richer, but it's absolutely right that those affected should be rewarded. And to my mind, that is direct financial reward, not a theoretical one. The last time we discussed fracking, the idea was that communities would be delighted if they got £10 for the village hall. I don't think that's the right way to do it. It needs to be direct to the individuals who are affected, and I've had preliminary discussions with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, but I don't have a formal thing to announce.
Right, Jacob Rees-Mogg there. Now, the boss of fracking company Quadrilla Resources, Francis Egan, welcomed the government's decision.
Use large quantities of gas, and we will continue to use them for decades to come. Every sensible analyst, including the Climate Change Committee, recognise that. And what has happened is we have given up exploring and effectively given up exploring and producing our own gas, particularly onshore in the UK. Now, if instead we develop our own resources, not only do we not have to rely on others to give us our energy, but there are a huge amount of tax benefits for the exchequer, local community benefits, and the potential to lower energy prices.
OK, well, to discuss the costs and benefits of fracking, I'm joined now by UK onshore oil and gas's Charles McAllister, and I've got Bob Dennett, co-founder of Frack Free Lancashire, as well. Look, chaps, I think there has to be one major question for me anyway, which is that does fracking actually cause earthquakes? Because if the answer to that is no, then I can't really see what the problem is. I will start with you, Charles McAllister from UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Is fracking dangerous?
OK, so no, it's definitely not dangerous. We've always maintained that we can develop shale gas in the UK safely and environmentally sensitively. If I can just run through the regulations and the seismic events that occurred in Lancashire. So the regulations were set at a 0.5 on the Richter scale, which according to a study by Liverpool University is the surface equivalent of sitting down on an office chair, OK? Now, the PNR1Z well, on which the moratorium was based, a report from that, the largest event was a 1.5, which is the same as dropping a honeydew melon in your kitchen. The largest event from the Preston New Road site was a 2.9. The surface vibration from that lasted for 2 seconds and is half the maximum permitted at construction sites. So what I'm saying here is if you apply the regulations that are currently applied to shale gas to construction, geothermal, quarrying or coal mining, none of them would be able to operate in the UK.
OK. All right, Bob Dennett now, co-founder of Frack Free Lancashire. I mean, from the sounds of it, what we've just heard there is you'd be causing more environmental shakes to the ground if you just built a conservatory on your house or sat down.
Well, I've got to say that the examples that have just been used as to the severity of the earth tremors we've experienced here in Lancashire are ridiculous. Yes, fracking causes earthquakes. Yes, every time they frack, they cause earth tremors, and some of those earth tremors were followed by larger events.
Bob, I'm very sorry about this. Bob, I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to silence you at all. Unfortunately, your sound quality is really poor. We're going to just try to work on that very quickly, OK, and get you back on. I'm really sorry, Bob. I promise you I will put the other side of this up in your behalf if I can, right? But we'll try and get your sound sorted very, very quickly. It's a shame that. But anyway, Charles, I will stick with you then.
Yep.
I imagine Bob was about to say that you're essentially lying and about to cause massive amounts of environmental damage.
Absolutely
I mean, surely drilling into the ground does cause something.
Absolutely. Well, no, there will be seismic events. There's absolutely no way to avoid that, but there is a maximum that could be induced because the seismic events are caused because of very small faults that we can't see.
Would you live near one of those?
Of course I would. I would especially live near a site. If I owned the land, the revenue that you would get is absolutely enormous. If you're in the local community, you get a share of revenue as well. And
how much is that then?
OK, so we set the minimum at 1% of revenue. And I'll give you an actual pound figure in a minute. Some companies have offered 6% of revenue. At current gas prices, for 40 wells on one site, you could be looking at £400 million.
And that's split between what?
For one site, over a community.
In Yorkshire?
Yeah, for one community, one site.
It's going to be not just God's own county, God's own millionaires.
Yeah, I mean, what other industry is offering the chance to level up the UK? Jobs, lower carbon footprint gas supply, tax, community benefits.
OK, so why are people like Bob against it then? Are they just NIMBYs?
I mean, well, I don't know specifically why Bob is against it. I'm sure Bob, I've seen him speak before, he's against many energy technologies. The fact is here, we need an energy mix in the UK. If we fail to develop the abundant shale gas resources in the north of England, we lock ourselves into reliance on imports. Bad for the economy, bad for the environment, bad geopolitically.
Well, this is, look, and by the way, can I just emphasise, it's a real shame that we lost Bob down there, because I was looking forward to a debate on this. But In terms of the reliance that we've had on Russia and tyrants, people like that, and just any outside country, and the costs that we're seeing now, how self-sufficient, so forget the money of this, how self-sufficient would this make us?
Good question. So the British Geological Survey produced a report in 2014 that said there was 500 years' worth of gas under the ground in the north of England. A common recovery factor is 10%, so we think we can get 50 years worth out of the ground. That will take a degree of time. We think we can be self-sufficient by the 2030s. But you see, in terms of delivering units of energy per acre per year, so energy over space and time, if you like, fracking's the best technology in the UK. There's no question of that.
So when we're talking, and last question here, but when we're talking about massive cuts to various different things, you know, people are skint at the minute. We've got people struggling to pay their energy bills. We're also wondering where we're going to get money to pay a load and recruit a load more GPs. It stretches out. Levelling up hasn't happened, for example. What you're saying is that this alone could sort all of that out.
I think, you see, every single measurable metric makes the case for fracking in the UK. The positives are so big. That's why the government, in my view, has demonstrated sensible foresight today, lifting the moratorium. We need to see more clarity. The written ministerial statement is good, but it's not enough. We need more clarity. But it's one of the greatest industrial and economic and geopolitical and environmental opportunities for a generation.
So just very, very, very lastly, you're absolutely convinced that if I talk to you in another 10 years' time, you're going to be apologising for massive earthquakes in Lancashire?
No, I absolutely will not. Look, again, as I said, there is a limit on how big they can be. And again, if we hit that limit, if we hit the 3, it would still be half what's permitted at construction sites. So you should go and shout at construction sites if you want to shout at me.
Going to shout at construction sites. Yeah, there we go. Unfortunately, that hobby is past me now. But thank you very much. Look, that was, of course, UK onshore oil and gas's Charles McAllister. Look, Bob, we're very sorry. Bob Dennett was with us for a little bit, co-founder of Frack Free Lancashire, but unfortunately, we couldn't use his sound. It did sound a little bit like fracking was taking place underneath where his microphone was for a second there. But coming up, we're live at St Thomas's Hospital with reaction to the Health Secretary's new plan to make sure that patients are seen by a GP within 2 weeks. Is it a realistic target? Can it actually be done? What does it say about the state of our health service that waiting 2 weeks to see a GP is an aspiration? I want to know your horror stories and your good stories as well from our NHS and GPs. GB Views at gbnews.uk. I've got all that coming your way and much, much more back in a mo.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, with you until 6 o'clock this evening. Coming up in this action-packed hour, we are reacting to the big healthcare revolution as Health Secretary Therese Coffey tries to make sure that we can all see our GPs within 2 weeks. I want to know the big questions, OK? Do GPs work hard enough? Is the NHS actually good enough? And will these new plans, which include throwing another 500 million big ones at the problem, actually work? I'll be putting those to a whole host of medical experts. But I want to know if you have faith in our NHS. When you get ill, do you think they will make you better? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't be shy. Get in touch. We can put those to medical professionals live on air. Also this afternoon, it's been announced that the government's rise in national insurance will be reversed from the 6th of November. It comes after news that the Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25%, taking borrowing costs to their highest levels since 2008. I want to know whose quid's in, who's skint, who are the winners, who are the losers. We'll reveal all of that live here on GB News Live. And the Chancellor as well is set to announce reforms to the benefit system tomorrow. This is interesting. Always gets a lot of you hot under the collar. Basically, do people on benefits deserve the money that they get? It's an unfashionable thing to ask, but we're going to ask it because Kwasi Kwarteng is planning to make part-time workers risk seeing their benefits cut if they do not agree to work longer hours. It's the whole benefit scroungers debate, isn't it? I'm going to talk you through all of that. It's all coming your way, and for want of a better phrase, of course, we will be doing that and much, much more, because we're even going to be asking whether or not vegans are going to stop having sex with meat eaters. Don't say you're undersold here on GB News Live. Here's the news.
Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has announced the rise in national insurance implemented under Boris Johnson is set to be cancelled later this year. The increase of 1.25%, which came into force in April, will be reversed this November. In a tweet, Kwasi Kwarteng called the measure a tax cut for workers and would allow for businesses to reinvest. The measures were previously announced by former Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help fund the health service and social care sector. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25% as it seeks to curb soaring prices. The rate has been lifted by half a percentage point from 1.75%, and it takes borrowing costs to their highest level since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of England now expects a 0.1% fall in GDP over the current quarter, indicating it believes the country is already in a recession. The government's unveiled a £500 million fund for NHS winter care with plans to improve access to GPs. Under the reforms, Health Secretary Therese Coffey has pledged patients with urgent needs will be able to see a GP on the same day. Those who want to book non-urgent appointments will be seen by a doctor within 2 weeks. Other medical workers, such as pharmacists and advanced nurse practitioners, will also be used to help ease workloads. Ms Coffey says her focus will be on patients.
Patients are my top priority, and I will be their champion, focusing on the issues that most affect them or their loved ones. Most of the time, patients have a great experience, but we must not paper over the problems that we face. We expect backlogs to rise before they fall, as more patients come forward for diagnosis and treatment after the pandemic. And the data shows, sadly, that there is too much variation in the access and care people receive across the country.
Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has questioned how the government will make it easier for patients to see a GP.
These measures will not come close to ensuring patients who need to be seen can be seen within the timescale set out. They will have minimal impact on fixing the current problems that general practice is facing over the winter. Not my words, but the verdict from the NHS Confederation on the Secretary of State's plans. Yeah. She says that patients will be able to get a GP appointment within 2 weeks. Her party scrapped the guarantee of an appointment within 2 days that Labour introduced when we were in government.
Well, the government has lifted a ban on fracking in England in a bid to provide what it's calling energy security for the UK. Fracking is a way of mining gas and oil from shale rock, which experts warn could cause earthquakes. Unveiling the measures, Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg said the government needs to pursue all avenues to provide domestic energy supply. But the Shadow Secretary for Climate Change, Ed Miliband, says the move tears up a Tory manifesto commitment.
They are lifting the ban, but they can't supply the evidence. And the British Geological Survey published today certainly doesn't do it. I look forward to him and his colleagues explaining his charter for earthquakes to the people of Lancashire, Yorkshire, the Midlands, Sussex, Dorset, and indeed Somerset, who will be part of his dangerous experiment.
The RMT union has announced another rail strike for next month. Over 40,000 workers from Network Rail and 15 train companies will strike on the 8th of October. It's part of a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and working conditions. Strikes are already set to go ahead on October the 1st and the 5th. Travel expert Simon Calder told GB News the strikes will challenge the new government.
So the RMT union is the crucial one because it's got an awful lot of members working for an awful lot of train operators, but it also has the signallers for Network Rail. And that's why when this strike happens on the 8th of October, just like the one on the 1st of October, there will be perhaps 1 in 5 trains running. And the idea is very much to keep the pressure on the new government, on the new Transport Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the death of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed in Huddersfield yesterday. An investigation has been launched after the teenager died in hospital following an attack close to the entrance of North Huddersfield Trust School. The head teacher says they've lost a wonderful student from their school community. The Prince and Princess of Wales have thanked volunteers and staff in Windsor supporting the crowds during the Queen's funeral. It's their first public engagement since the Queen was laid to rest on Monday. Thousands of people lined the streets to see the state hearse make its way down the long walk. The royal family is observing an extended period of mourning until Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Yes, hello everybody, you're watching GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, and the Health Secretary Therese Coffey said that she would not apologise for setting a 2-week appointment target for GPs. Talking of targets, some GPs feel like they now have one on their backs. She announced a 5-step plan in the House of Commons earlier as she hopes to offer 1 million extra appointments so that patients can be seen the same day if they're really in urgent need. To support social care, there's a 500 million quid adult social care discharge fund, although discharge is probably the wrong word to use when you're talking about illnesses. The chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, Jeremy Hunt, important we get that name right, was critical of these targets.
Could I ask her to rethink this new 2-week access target for general practice? If targets were the answer, we would have the best access in the world in the NHS because we have more targets than any other healthcare system in the world. GPs alone have 72 targets. Adding a 73rd won't help them or their patients because it's not more targets the NHS needs, it's more doctors. So when it comes to the workforce plan that she recommitted to, and I welcome her commitment to publishing it, could you tell the House, will it have hard numbers so that we know how many doctors we're going to need in 10, 15, 20 years' time and whether we're actually training them? And will she publish it before Christmas so that staff can at least go into winter knowing there's a plan for the future?
Jeremy Hunt there in the Commons. There's a big medical theme running through this show, actually, because of these massive announcements by Therese Coffey. And I did do a massive call-out for you guys as well. I want to hear as much from you as possible. gbviews at gbnews.uk about your experiences so we can put them to medical experts and indeed doctors themselves live here on air. So many of you getting in touch. It's unbelievable. People saying that they can't... We've had John here, can't get a knee replacement, etc. We've had Bridget getting on. She's been trying to get a GP's appointment. actually only been able to get 3 in 3 years. Lots of talk about how easy it is to get a phone consultation but not a face-to-face appointment. We want to hear from you because we are the People's Channel, and indeed our political reporter, Catherine Forster, is outside St Thomas's Hospital now for us in central London. What have people been telling you today about their experiences, please?
Well, people are generally very busy. We're trying to talk to people coming out of A&E. Understandably, they want to get home. Nobody really in a mood to chat. But obviously, the NHS is under huge pressure. We're hearing these horror stories all the time, aren't we? People waiting an hour for an ambulance, for heart attacks, for strokes. Terrible, terrible backlogs for treatment. So today, our new health secretary, literally just over 2 weeks in the job, has unveiled her ABCD plan, dubbed by Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, as a rather Sesame Street. Obviously, some of the details for doctors' GP surgeries was fleshed out before she actually spoke in the Commons, but some more information specifically about ambulances and about social care. In terms of ambulances, they're going to try to speed up discharge. They're going to get more people handling calls. In terms of the backlog, more community diagnostic centres. And also, I think this is significant, changing the pension rules to incentivise GPs to stay with the NHS or to not retire early, as many of them are doing. And also in terms of social care, I think very significant is the £500 million package that's been announced to help discharge people, because in August, over half the people in hospital that were ready to be sent home simply couldn't be because the care was not in place either at home or in the community for them to convalesce or be looked after. So they remained stuck in hospital. That's something like 1 in 8 of all the hospital beds. Jeremy Hunt saying we've got 72 targets for GPs already, and a 73rd one is not going to help. And also, of course, the huge staff shortages, about 132,000 vacancies. And in the care sector, even more, 167,000. And of course, in the care sector, you can earn more working in the supermarket. So lots of questions still without answers, and obviously going into a very difficult winter, and the temperatures beginning to drop.
Indeed. Could this be a sticking plaster over a gaping wound, to use a medical analogy there? Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster outside St Thomas's Hospital in central London for us. Well, I do want to put a lot of these questions to people who really know, as well as Catherine, of course. And to do that, I've got Health and Social Affairs editor at the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnson. Joining me right now, Lucy, good to see you again. Thank you very much. I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at my inbox here. Some good ones from people getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Apparently, Essex is doing rather well in terms of getting a GP appointment. But apart from the odd smattering of joy, it is a tale of woe in my inbox at the minute as people give me their horror stories of their inability to get a GP's appointment. So let's start with the GPs. Do they need to work harder?
I think we've got a legacy of the pandemic that's kind of spun over, and now we just have just over 50% of GPs who are still seeing patients remotely, and that obviously causes problems. You can't do the same consultation if you're seeing people, if you're not seeing people face to face. Whether it's arguable whether they have the capacity. They would say they are about 1,000, more than 1,000 short. And they would say that they have a lot of stuff to do, which is not in GP time, that they have extra hours but so these targets are all very well, but most people actually can get to see a GP within 2 weeks anyway. So I don't know how much it's going to help this whole system.
Can you clear something up for me, please? It's a question almost as old as time, this, which is the relation to GPs working in the NHS and then working privately. A load of people getting in touch with me right now saying, well, if my GP did more in the NHS and spent less time working at Bupa or wherever else, then we wouldn't have this crisis of people, well, if there is a crisis of people not being able to see their GPs. Do GPs do too much lucrative private work?
I don't know the figures on that. There's a very good argument for saying that consultants in secondary care and hospitals do a lot of private work, and also that there should be 7-day GP and hospital, doctor care. We need 7-day working. I mean, the part of the problem is that the NHS has become a political football, and politicians come and go, and they don't have long-term measures in place. And many of the measures that we see just sort of tinker around the edges, don't they? They don't actually tackle the huge workforce crisis or incentivize enough people to come into the system. As your previous commentator was saying, we're about 130,000 short.
Talk to me about how we can sort that out. You're right on the numbers there, about 130,000 in NHS, 167,000 in social care. How do we sort that out? How do we get more people working? Because that's an easy way around it, isn't it? More people working, fewer overstretched and overstressed doctors, and potentially fewer negligence claims as well.
Well, absolutely. So looking at social care, that is a huge problem. And as your previous commentator said, we have 1 in 8 people that are stuck in hospital beds. So they...
Oh, OK. Oh, we've lost Lucy for the moment. I'm sure Lucy will come back to us like a medical boomerang in just a second. But, yes, some of these stats are actually quite shocking in terms of the number of vacancies that we have now within our NHS and within our social care system. Around 132,000 vacancies in the NHS, 167,000 in social care. And I suppose that's the flip side of it, isn't it? I'm sure that people like you and I, when we can't get a GP's appointment or we're waiting ages, or especially over those lockdown days when people were trying to be diagnosed over FaceTime, especially the elderly, I mean, how do they work FaceTime? I'm not dissing a lot of the elderly. I know a lot of people are very technologically proficient, but some people aren't, and that's a problem, isn't it? We all get very frustrated about that, but the big question, I suppose, is, are GPs working hard enough? Do we get value for taxpayer money when it comes to GPs? You might be intrigued to know that the average salary of a GP is apparently £112,000 a year. That's included a £10,000 hike in the last 12 months. Is that fair enough? Is it not? I want to also go to a bit of you guys, because I've been asking a lot of you your experiences with the NHS. I think it's important to hold a mirror up to the nation on that. I'm just going to squeeze a couple in. Richard says, hello, Patrick. I'd like to give a little bit of balance. I know the NHS has been criticised a lot. And he says he's got a particular medical condition, OK? And basically, it was delayed a little bit, but now he has actually got his care. And he's basically saying here that he was willing to accept that there would be a knock-on delay over the pandemic. How do you feel about all of that? We'll be returning to this NHS issue throughout the show. But for all of you people out there watching right now, wondering where all your money's going, earlier this afternoon, the Treasury has announced that the 1.25 percentage point rise in national insurance will be reversed from November the 6th. We're expecting more announcements from the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng with his mini-budget that apparently won't be that mini tomorrow. Also earlier today, the Bank of England has announced that it will hike interest rates to their highest in more than 13 years and indicated it believes the economy is already in recession. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee increased the base interest rate by 50 basis points from 1.75% to 2.25%, all in a bid to tackle high inflation. I've just read those numbers out and it's already given me a headache, to be perfectly honest with you, but a man who lives and breathes this stuff is sitting next to me at the moment. GBNews' economics and business editor is Liam Halligan, and this is On the Money. Right, Liam, recession sounds terrifying. What's going on?
A recession is when you have 2 successive quarters, that's 2 successive 3-month periods of the economy contracting, what we call negative growth. These aren't official numbers and these are subject to revision, but the Bank of England, when it raised interest rates today, as you just said, Patrick, it indicated that in its view, the UK is now in recession. That's a pretty serious slowdown. It's a very mild recession. We're talking about 0.1% contraction in the second quarter of the year and the third quarter of the year, but a recession nonetheless. OK, and so when we've seen now the mini-budget that's going to drop tomorrow, apparently, Liz Truss relentlessly saying things like, let's go for growth, etc. Is that the right thing? There's certainly a big debate to be had, and tomorrow there will be a slew of economic announcements. As you just said, the Chancellor signalling that increase in national insurance that Rishi Sunak imposed in April, that will be reversed. So that's national insurance for employers and employees. That will come back down. Rishi Sunak's corporation tax rise for businesses, that will stay where it is. Rather than going to 25%, it will stay at 19%. You got possibly a cut in VAT coming tomorrow, possibly a cut in stamp duty. If you're buying a house, you won't have to pay that tax. Some people will say that's good. Other peoples would say that will juice up the housing market even more, making it tougher for youngsters to get on the housing ladder. There's a big philosophical debate here, Patrick. It basically boils down to when you're in a fiscal corner, as we are, borrowing lots and lots and lots, and when there's low growth, should you cut taxes, even though that will mean the public finances get worse in the short run, in order to boost the growth so the cake gets bigger, so you get more tax revenue overall? It's definitely a risk that Liz Truss is taking with Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng tomorrow, which is why tomorrow there's going to be a huge amount of politics surrounding this announcement.
Absolutely. Stay where you are, Liam, because we're going to be joined now by Keith Barber, who is the product director at the Family Building Society. Indeed, a mortgage expert as well. Thank you very much, Keith. Great to have you on the show. And I'm going to kind of hand over to Liam, actually, a bit on this one, because why not, right? He's our economics and business editor. What do I know? Go on, Liam. What do you want to ask this guy?
Well, Keith, what I'd ask you is to reflect on the impact of these interest rate rises. When I was a lad and bought my first property, there were many, many millions of people on variable rate mortgages. The number's a lot lower now, isn't it? It's about 2.2 million households. Still big, but a lot less than it used to be. We've got 8.8 million households on fixed interest mortgages, at least fixed for now. What are your views about the impact of this rate rise on the broader economy?
So you described it quite right, Liam. So in the short term, the impact of the rate rises won't be felt by most of those borrowers on fixed rate mortgages. And that's probably 80% of the mortgage business, the mortgages which are outstanding in the UK. But people coming to the end of a fixed rate or buying for the first time or looking to borrow some more money will see that the higher rates are making this more expensive than before. You know, an increase of 0.5% on a 25-year repayment mortgage of £100,000 means about an extra £27 a month, takes your payments to £528 a month. If you've got an interest-only mortgage of £100,000, that's another £42 a month on average. So not a lot as a monetary amount, but if you're stretched by your other expenses going up, and this is the fifth rate rise which has happened from the Bank of England over the last few months. You know, it's building up, and it's doing what the Bank of England wants. It's sucking money out of the economy.
Believe it or not, it's actually the 8th successive interest rate rise. Interest rates are still pretty low by historic standards, but they've gone up enormously in proportionate terms, given that we're only at 0.1% in the depths of lockdown. So what would you advise, Keith? You're from a building society. Building societies are generally a bit cuddlier, a bit friendlier than banks. You're cooperatives. What would you advise a young couple who are still on a variable rate mortgage or coming to the end of a fixed rate mortgage? Should they be trying to fix again? Rates have gone up, but they're likely to go up even more, right?
Yeah, that's my expectation. Interest rates will go up further. Coming back to what you were saying about rates rising a lot, it wasn't that long ago when bank base rate was much lower that you could get a 2-year fix for 1%. The average 2-year fix that started in August would have been 3.6%. So it's gone up massively. So if you're concerned about your monthly payments and your affordability, and you're on a variable rate or you're coming to the end of an existing fixed rate, then you need to be talking to your mortgage broker, a broker who's got access to the whole market, and take advice on what's best for your circumstances. It might be a 2-year fixed is right, a 3-year, a 5-year, or even a longer one.
OK, Keith, thank you very much. That's cuddly Keith Barber there, with the product director at the Family Building Society and mortgage expert. Thank you very much to Liam Halligan as well, our economics and business editor. He's going to be a very busy man tomorrow. Very busy indeed.
Busy enough today.
Busy enough today, and even busier tomorrow. You're going to be burnt out. We're going to wring you dry because it's going to be Kwasi Kwarteng's not so mini budget. But there we go. Coming up, I'm going to be asking, talking of the devil himself, whether or not we should have a tougher benefit system. So the Chancellor is set to announce reforms tomorrow. Kwasi Kwarteng is planning to make part-time workers risk seeing their benefits cut if they do not agree to work longer hours. What I want to know is there a benefits culture? Are people on the take? Are there benefit scroungers? What's the scale of all of this stuff? Should people actually work harder? I'll be back in a moment.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland.
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It is 4:29. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25% as it seeks to curb soaring prices. The rate has been lifted by half a percentage point from 1.75% and takes borrowing costs to their highest levels since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of England now expects a 0.1% fall in GDP over the current quarter, indicating it believes the country is already in a recession. The Chancellor has announced the rise in national insurance implemented under Boris Johnson is to be cancelled later this year. The increase of 1.25%, which came into force in April, will be reversed this November. In a tweet, Kwasi Kwarteng called the measure a tax cut for workers. The government has unveiled a £500 million fund for NHS winter care. Under the reforms, the Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, has pledged patients with urgent needs will be able to see a GP on the same day. Those who want to book non-urgent appointments will be seen by a doctor within weeks. The government has lifted a ban on fracking in England in a bid to provide what it's calling energy security for the UK. Fracking is a way of mining gas and oil from shale rock, which experts warn could cause earthquakes. Unveiling the measures earlier, Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg said the government needs to pursue all avenues to provide domestic energy supply. But the Shadow Secretary for Climate Change says the move tears up a Tory manifesto commitment. The RMT union has announced another rail strike next month. Over 40,000 workers from Network Rail and 15 train companies will walk out on the 8th of October. It's part of a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and working conditions. Strikes were already set to go ahead on October the 1st and the 5th. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Don't go anywhere. Patrick's back now.
Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng is set to announce tomorrow that part-time workers will risk having their benefits cut if they do not agree to work longer hours. So the government believes the measure will help to fill the vacancies in the job market and help those on low incomes earn more by giving them intensive support to seek work. Well, the move will reportedly affect more than 100,000 people and take effect in January. We were, rather ironically, supposed to have somebody from Benefit Street Britain on earlier, but apparently they've dropped, so they are quite literally not working today. But joining me on the show now to discuss the impact of this is Tony Wilson, who's the director of the Institute for Employment Studies. But apparently he's not working today either, which is nice. I mean, so there we go. Tony will be presumably joining us very, very shortly, so we can discuss this. But I want to know from you, gbviews@gbnews.uk, which is whether or not you feel as though we have a benefits culture in this country. We've got a lot of people here, I think, on benefits, haven't we? There's that question as well, though, isn't there, about whether or not actually they are paid enough. Is it an incentive to work or is it not an incentive to work? I believe now we can finally go to Tony Wilson, Director at Institute for Employment Studies. Tony, great to see you and finally put you to work. Do we have too many benefit scroungers in this country?
Hi, Patrick. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. I got cut off. Look, I don't think so, and I'm not sure that actually that's what this policy is about. Although it is the way that ministers were briefing it last night. I think what we do have a problem of is a shortage of workers, and the government thinks that part of the way to address that is to get part-time people to work longer hours. I mean, they might be right, but I don't think that's going to be enough. I think we need to do a lot more to help people, many of whom aren't on benefits, to get back into the labour force and help meet these shortages that we've got at the moment in labour and shortages in skills.
Is it fair to say that some people on benefits are on the take?
I think it's really hard to know. I mean, the reality is we've got pretty low rates of benefit fraud, for example. We've got pretty low rates of errors in the benefit system. And actually, a lot of the issues we've got around, for example, fraud and error in benefits are more where actually claimants themselves are the victims. A lot of it is more to do with kind of organised crime, for example, like making large-scale fraudulent claims or misrepresenting people's circumstances to try to get more money. We actually have a pretty tight system around requiring people to attend job centres, requiring them to demonstrate they're looking for work, and we sanction people a lot. We've got the highest rate of benefit sanctions now that we've ever had, and so there's quite a lot that's been done already to try to force people off benefits. But the reality is, like, a lot of people who are on benefits aren't getting any support at all, and they're not actually required to look for work. They're not required to be available for work.
Could you give us some stats? Could you give us some stats on the amount of people in this country who are on benefits?
So about 5.5 million people who are on universal credit, and that's split roughly evenly between people who are in work and people who are out of work. So the announcement yesterday was specifically around people who are out of work. Who are in work, beg your pardon, around trying to make people work longer hours. There's about bit less than 1.5 million people who are required to attend job centres regularly to demonstrate they're looking for work. And then there's a bit more than that who are actually, about another 1.5–2 million, I think, who aren't actually required to attend job centres. Typically, they're people who've got health conditions or their parents are very young kids.
OK, all right. And so, essentially, do you think it's unfair, then, to say to these people, well, you need to work harder? Maybe they've got other things going on in their lives. You know, like you said, maybe they have got a young kid. All is not as it seems.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, you know, I don't know. I think at the moment, this is, the government's trying to make a wider point here, I think, about showing that they're tough on welfare and they're cracking down on welfare. The trouble is what employers want is help to fill their jobs. So 1.3 million vacancies, and ultimately a lot of people are out of work, particularly older people, aren't on benefit at all. They're living off pension. And so there's a lot more we can do to bring people back into work who aren't working. What I would say, though, is we've had requirements in our benefit system for 100 years. For 100 years, people where you want to get unemployment assistance of some kind, you've got to look for work. I don't think anyone is going to do that, and I think we need to make sure that people who are able to look for work are looking for work, and that they can't turn jobs down. But that isn't really what we're talking about today.
That's an interesting one, because I'm concerned that people want to have their cake and eat it. There's a lot of people out there who think they're too good to clean toilets for a living. I've got to tell you, if all this falls through, or some might say when all of this falls through for me here, I had a wife and kids to support and a mortgage to pay and everything, and there's no job that I wouldn't do.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, if you did sign on for universal credit and you weren't assessed as having a significant health condition, you'd find it pretty hard to hide from those sorts of jobs, because you're required to account online for basically what you're doing all the time. You're expected to be looking for work or preparing for work for the equivalent of 35 hours a week, and you can't turn jobs down. If you turn jobs down, you'll lose your benefit. We do have we've got a pretty tight system on this. The idea that you can just kind of hide on benefits, not look for work, not be available for work, turn jobs down, isn't really the case, and it hasn't been for decades. Actually, I mean, it's been a long time since that, and that's part why Job Centre Plus was created 20 years ago, was to make sure that employment monitoring and job and benefits payments were brought together. I think, having said that, though, there clearly are people who would rather not work than work. Yeah. I just think a lot of them aren't on benefit. And they're living off living off savings or other income, or in some cases they've got pretty chaotic lives and they're sofa surfing and they're not able to access support.
Yeah,
so I think there's still more we can do.
Yeah. Exactly. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Tony Wilson, Director of the Institute for Employment Studies, who I believe also shares a name with the bloke who used to run the Hacienda in Manchester. But you've been getting in touch with your views on GP appointments and the NHS, gbviews at gbnews.uk. And a few months ago, this is from Lisa, thank you. A few months ago, I had to change GP surgery as my family and myself could not get an appointment. I have not had a face-to-face appointment in 2 years and 7 months, nor has anyone else in the family. Make sure when you do send these in, though, that you tell us where you're from, because it's a real mixed bag in my inbox. It must be said that most people, Lisa, are a bit like you, which is saying to me that they've struggled when they've really needed to access a GP to be able to get that service. But it does seem to be a massive postcode lottery in my inbox at the minute. Andrew says, I wonder how easy you could access your GP if they were paid per person on a face-to-face visit, probably getting the same day. Interesting stuff, this, Andrew, because when the pandemic was really kicking off, and to be honest with you, quite a while after that as well, I was getting loads of people getting in touch with me saying, hang on a minute, I couldn't get a GP's appointment, then I went to get my COVID jab, and there they are, sat there. Or I went privately, and there they are, sat there. And there was massive, massive condemnation of people then. And I kicked off big time as well with it. I said that GPs need to pull their finger out, but it'd be interesting to see whether or not you feel as though your waiting time to see a GP has diminished already. The reason why we're talking about this, and we will continue to talk about this throughout the show, is because today is a big day for the NHS. It's a big day for GPs. It's a big day for sick people as well, as Therese Coffey has desperately tried to make sure that you and me and everybody that we know and love can see a GP no matter what within a couple of weeks. Just time for one more view here. Marla has been in touch. I have had problems with GP appointments before and after lockdown. Very on brand, Marla, thank you. But quite recently, things have improved. Even receptions are becoming polite. Yes, gone are the days where we thought we should put a GP's receptionist in charge of the channel because they wouldn't let anyone through, would they? Coming up, with fears of further unrest between Muslims and Hindus in Leicester over the weekend, I'm asking, is religion itself divisive? Lots of you have been getting massively hot under the collar about this. Sick and tired of lawlessness, sick and tired of seeing people kicking off for what many people might argue were cultural issues that have nothing to do with this country. Is multiculturalism working? Is diversity working? Is integration working? Back in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, more police have been drafted in for the weekend amid fears of further violent clashes between Muslims and Hindus in Leicester. Yeah. The unrest spread almost 50 miles to Smethwick in the West Midlands as well, with genuine fears that it might not end there. Video footage from Tuesday night shows up to 200 masked and hooded men gathered outside a Hindu temple, shouting a turn of phrase that I will not shout live on national news. But what role does religion play in all of this unrest? And does it suggest that maybe religion itself can be divisive, or, frankly, is some religions too sensitive? Joining me is a former honorary chaplain to the Queen, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, and Mohammed Amin, who is the former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Gavin Ashenden, I'll start with you, a former honorary chaplain to the Queen. Is the problem religion itself?
Well, it's no more religion itself than it would be to blame football for violent hooligans. The game of football doesn't automatically lead to violence, but nonetheless, we've been through a time in our culture when violence became associated with different football teams because we take very easily the idea of tribalism. So you can have aggression between human beings with or without religion, with or without sport, with or without different colour, with or without different nationalities. We're just quite violent as people. However, one of the questions it might be more useful to ask, I mean, we have two problems. One is multiculturalism and the social media have played a big part in inflaming the tensions here. But if you want to ask a question about religions, the sensible one to ask will be which ones contain within them the greatest power to stop violence. And one of the reasons I'm pleased to be a Christian is because Christianity teaches turning the other cheek. And that's at least a way in which violence can potentially be contained. Few other religions do it. But you can't blame religion for the violence of the outbreaks in Leicester by itself.
No, it's probably worth noting that I am religious myself at this point as well. But Mohammed Amin, I would like to just bring you in here now, former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum. I'm just going to ask you a question that I get asked a lot myself when I talk about issues like this. We've had a lot of incidents, whether it's the latest one that's been going on in Leicester and Smethwick, whether it's things like Batley Grammar School, whether it's protests outside a primary school in Birmingham again, actually, where they wanted to educate children not to bully gay people. Is the Muslim faith potentially a bit more sensitive to criticism and things like blasphemy than others?
I don't think so. All religions can be read either to promote intolerance and hatred, and people from all religious groups have done terrible things in the past and to some extent do terrible things today. And I don't believe that Islam is any different from the other religions in that respect. We have terrorists in ISIS who are Muslims. We have people who spend their entire lives devoted to charity because they're Muslims.
Yes, no, it's an interesting point. And this is one of the things that I wanted to to talk about, because you raised the issue there, Dr. Gavin, about, well, multiculturalism and the importance of getting it right. I mean, the Midlands is a prime example of this. It is a hotbed of multiculturalism with people from all over the world thrust together, very often within quite small spaces. And when you see things like what's been going on in Leicester or Smethwick, it's easy to play into the hands of people who say multiculturalism will never work in Britain.
Well, you could never say something will never work. But on the other hand, you could also say that some ways of dealing with human beings are less likely to be successful because they misunderstand human nature. I think what we have done is we've imported a lot of historical violence from the Indian subcontinent into our country. That's what immigration and multiculturalism has done. And there are two ways of dealing with it. I mean, the preferred way for me would be to evangelize them so they become Christians and learn to practice to love their enemies and turn the other cheek. The other way of doing it is to have a rule of law. So you don't have Muslim no-go areas where other people can't go. And we increasingly, I'm really sorry to say, but my colleague, Monsignor Michael Nazir Ali, previous Bishop of Rochester, an Asian himself, has been warning about no-go areas that are run by either national or religious organizations. What we need is the rule of law in this country. And unfortunately, the police are so terrified about being accused of racism, they don't impose the rule of law.
Mohammed Amin, can you respond to that as former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum? A common question these days about Muslim no-go areas in the UK.
This trope about Muslim no-go areas in the UK has been hanging around for decades, at least a decade. It's often raised by right-wing American extremists. There are no Muslim no-go areas in this country.
Does it depend what you define as a no-go area, though, I suppose? As it's a very literal term, yes, it would mean, well, you can't go into it. But does it not mean maybe a potentially hostile environment to anyone who isn't of that faith? And does that exist?
No. Absolutely not. If you look at areas in this country where we have cities like Manchester, Birmingham, London, where particular areas there are large numbers of Muslims, you get very large numbers of non-Muslims going there quite deliberately because they want to go to the shops, they want to go to the restaurants. There are no Muslim no-go areas.
That's Mohammed Amin's take on that. Gavin, Dr. Gavin, I could see you were itching to get involved there.
Well, I'm really sorry, but I mean, on my way to GB News the other day, I walked through Hyde Park Speaker's Corner, coming to actually into the studios on the day of the Queen's funeral. The Speaker's Corner has been a very tricky place. A young Muslim woman who became a Christian was knifed there, and the police didn't want to do anything about it. Frankly, as a white Christian man walking through Speaker's Corner, trying to make my way through a very large, aggressive crowd of Muslims, it was pretty close to a no-go area, and I felt enormously threatened. I spent the whole of my life in London. I've walked through Speaker's Corner many a time. Never before have I felt threatened by a large group of people who didn't share my faith or my culture. You can't say it's not a trope. It's nothing to do with right-wing Americans. It's the experience of people who live in this country in different cultural areas. And the police should do something about it, and they don't. They're too scared.
Well, Mohammed Amin, I'll obviously come back on that. I suppose there's a couple of things there, which is that in Dr. Gavin's view, they do exist, but also the fact that if they do exist, or if there is indeed some issue there, that the police are too afraid of being called racist to do anything about it. Could that be something that we're seeing now with, you know, elements of the Hindu community, elements of the Muslim community going at it together in the Midlands? Well, where are the police in all of this? Are they too afraid of being called racist?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I've not been to Leicester. I'm sitting in London at the moment, but the police have a clear responsibility to enforce the law. And if people are misbehaving at Speaker's Corner, and Speaker's Corner is a place where people gather, it's not a place where people live. You couldn't call it a Muslim no-go area. If people are misbehaving at Speaker's Corner, regardless of what religion they are, the police need to intervene.
Well, I suppose that there has been a criticism for a while now of various different events that have taken place. And yes, it's important to point out that it is a small minority, but unfortunately there does seem to be a certain element of regularity, Mohammed, when it comes to things that I can just rattle off here, like Batley Grammar, etc. All of these things of the police potentially being a bit too afraid to act. And Dr. Gavin, I suppose, as far as you're concerned, I'll just give you one more on each of this, by the way, but Dr. Gavin, as far as you're concerned, at the minute, is it integration not working or a lack of will from certain communities to integrate?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, clearly integration is not working. Since I can't speak for other people, I shouldn't try to. But I think what I would like to see in religious terms, I would, if there was, whenever there's been violence between Christian communities, one of the things that Christian leaders do is they say, it's against our religion to do violence. You must stop, say sorry, and love your enemies. I'd like to see that kind of message coming out from Muslim religious leaders and from Hindu religious leaders. And when we've had all three religions speaking with the same clarity, calling their people to non-violence, then after that it's a matter for the police. But those are the three things I'd like to see happen.
Just quickly, I'm about to ask you a massive question, despite the fact that I've said just quickly, Mohammed Amin, so apologies about that. We are a bit pressed for time. There is maybe you would call this a trope, where unfortunately certain elements of the Muslim community will never respect or accept the rule of law in this country because by definition they are serving a higher power. Your views on that?
Complete nonsense. You could say exactly the same thing about Christians, Jews, Hindus. All of us believe in the importance of worshipping our God. No religion teaches disobedience to the laws of the country.
Short and sweet, both of you. I must say thank you very, very much. I thought it was a really informative discussion. I've enjoyed that. We could talk literally all day about it and go down about a million different avenues. So thank you so much, both of you. That was the former honorary chaplain to the Queen, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, and Mohammed Amin as well, who is the former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum. Gosh, get your views coming in on everything that was discussed there. GBviews at gbnews.uk. No doubt loads of you will be getting in touch. But as eagle-eyed viewers will be able to see, just below me right there, fresh rail strikes have been kicking off. We want your views on all of that as well. Make sure you get in touch on all that. Will you be affected? Will you not be affected? Isn't it a bit of a coinky-dink that they're going to be timed to coincide with the Conservative Party conference? But we're going global here. We're going global. GB News Live crosses over to New York, where Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is speaking at the UN Security Council. Take it away, James.
Peace and security. They undertook to refrain from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or the political independence of any state. Yet, 7 months ago, President Putin invaded Ukraine illegally and without justification. He ignored the resounding pleas for peace that I heard in this council on the 17th of February. Since then, Ukrainians' spirit of defense and defiance in the protection of their country continues to inspire free peoples and nations. Every day, the devastating consequences of Russia's invasion become more clear. UN agencies have confirmed more than 14,000 civilian casualties so far, and the actual total is likely to be much higher. More than 17 million Ukrainians in humanitarian need, 7 million displaced within Ukraine, and more than 7 million Ukrainian refugees in Europe. We see the mounting evidence of Russian atrocities against civilians, including indiscriminate shelling and targeted attacks on over 200 medical facilities and 40 educational institutions, and horrific acts of sexual violence. We see from the reports of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights that in parts of Ukraine currently under Russian control, civilians are subject to torture, arbitrary detention, and forced deportation to Russia. And we have seen more grisly discoveries in Izium. And it's not just Ukrainians who are the victims. President Putin's war has spread hardship and food insecurity across the globe, plunging millions of the world's most vulnerable into hunger and famine. And once again, as we've seen here today, Russia has sought to deny responsibility. It has tried to lay the blame on those who have rightly imposed sanctions on President Putin's regime in response to his illegal actions. Let us be clear, we are not sanctioning food. It is Russia's actions that are preventing food and fertilizer getting to developing countries. It is Russia's farms, infrastructure, and delaying its exports. I sat here assuring this council that Russia had no intention of invading its neighbour. We now know that was a lie. And today, I have listened to further instalments of Russia's catalogues of distortions, dishonesty, and disinformation. He has left the chamber. I'm not surprised. I don't think Mr. Lavrov wants to hear the collective condemnation of this council. But we saw through him then, and we saw through him again today. We have information which means that we know that Russia is about to hold sham referenda on sovereign Ukrainian territory with no basis in law, under the threat of violence, after mass displacements of people in areas that voted overwhelmingly for Ukrainian independence. We know what Vladimir Putin is doing. He is planning to fabricate the outcome of those referenda. He is planning to use that to annex sovereign Ukrainian territory. And he is planning to use it as a further pretext to escalate his aggression. That is what he plans to do. And we call on all countries to reject this charade and to refuse to recognize any results. We are used to seeing Russian lies and distortions. But let us listen to the testimony of Ukrainians who tell us the truth, who tell us the reality of President Putin's war. Dr. Olena Yuzvak, her husband, Ole, and their 22-year-old son, Dmitry, were abducted by Russian forces from their home in Hostomel, near Bucha, in March. Russian soldiers shot Ole twice in the legs before they were all blindfolded and bundled into an armoured personnel carrier. And I want you to hear Olena's story in her own words, and I quote, "First, they took us to a bombed-out house. The Russian soldiers kept saying they were going to kill us. My husband was left for hours lying on the floor in the pool of his blood. I don't know why. We'd done nothing wrong. Then they took my son away from us. I don't know where. I don't know if we'll ever see him again. I just want my boy back." End of quote. Olena's story and those of many others tell us the truth, the real truth. This is a war of annexation, a war of conquest, to which President Putin now wants to send even more of Russia's young men and women, making peace even less likely. Mr. Putin must understand the world is watching and we will not give up. Less likely. Mr. Putin must understand the world is watching and we will not give up. Of members of the Security Council, we must unequivocally reject Russia's attempts to annex Ukrainian territory. We must make clear to President Putin that his attack on the Ukrainian people must stop, that there can be no impunity for those perpetrating atrocities, and that he must withdraw from Ukraine and restore regional and global stability. If he chose to, he could stop this war, a war which has done untold damage to the Ukrainian and the Russian peoples. His war is an assault on Ukraine, an assault on the UN Charter, and an assault on the international norms that protect us all. So, we stand with our Ukrainian friends for as long as it takes, because Ukraine's fight for freedom is the world's fight for freedom. It is our fight for freedom. And if Ukraine's sovereignty and territory are not respected, then no country is truly secure. These are the reasons why Ukraine can and must win. Thank you.
Je remercie Son Excellence. I thank His Excellency, Mr. Cleverly, for his statement. I give the floor to Her Excellency.
OK, James Cleverly there speaking at the UN Security Council. Strong words indeed for his Russian counterparts. That was our Foreign Secretary. James Cleverly did accuse Sergei Lavrov and indeed Vladimir Putin of lying repeatedly and read out some quite harrowing testimony of some people who were victims of the Putin invasion of Ukraine. We do have a lot more coming your way here on GB News Live in what is going to be the final hour of this show. Yes, we're going to be talking about Russia. We're going to be talking about what's been going on with the economy as well as we build up to this not-so-mini budget tomorrow. NHS waiting times, GP appointments, that's all been on the agenda today as Therese Coffey got stuck in and essentially asked GPs, in a way, to work a little bit harder. And, of course, we cannot ignore what is still going on in Leicester. Does multiculturalism work? All of that coming your way after your latest headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has announced the rise in national insurance implemented under Boris Johnson is to be cancelled this year. The increase of 1.25%, which came into force in April, will be reversed in November. In a tweet, Kwasi Kwarteng called the measure a tax cut for workers and would allow for businesses to reinvest. The measures were previously announced by former Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help fund the health service and social care sector. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25% as it seeks to curb soaring prices. The rate has been lifted by half a percentage point from 1.75% and takes borrowing costs to their highest level since 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of England now expects a 0.1% fall in GDP over the current quarter, indicating it believes the country is already in a recession. The government's unveiled a £500 million fund for NHS winter care with plans to improve access to GPs. Under the reforms, Health Secretary Therese Coffey has pledged patients with urgent needs will be able to see a GP on the same day. Those who want to book non-urgent appointments will be seen by a doctor within 2 weeks. Other medical workers, such as pharmacists and advanced nurse practitioners, will also be used to help ease the workloads. Ms Coffey says her focus will be on patients.
I'm standing up here for patients. I'm focused on my ABCD because that's what most people experience. Getting access to a doctor, getting access to a dentist, having an ambulance turn up on time rather than be stuck in terms of being stuck outside a hospital. Those are the things that matter when people need care the most.
Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has questioned how the government will make it easier for patients to see a GP.
These measures will not come close to ensuring patients who need to be seen can be seen within the timescale set out. They will have minimal impact on fixing the current problems that general practice is facing over the winter. Not my words, but the verdict from the NHS Confederation on the Secretary of State's plans. Yeah. She says that patients will be able to get a GP appointment within 2 weeks. Her party scrapped the guarantee of an appointment within 2 days that Labour introduced when we were in government.
The government has lifted a ban on fracking in England in a bid to provide what it's calling energy security for the UK. Fracking is a way of mining gas and oil from shale rock, which experts warn could cause earthquakes. Unveiling the measures, Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg said the government needs to pursue all avenues to provide domestic energy supply. But the Shadow Secretary for Climate Change, Ed Miliband, says the move tears up a Tory manifesto commitment.
They are lifting the ban, but they can't supply the evidence. And the British Geological Survey published today certainly doesn't do it. I look forward to him and his colleagues explaining his charter for earthquakes to the people of Lancashire, Yorkshire, the Midlands, Sussex, Dorset, and indeed Somerset, who will be part of his dangerous experiment.
The RMT union has announced another rail strike for next month. Over 40,000 workers from Network Rail and 15 train companies will strike on the 8th of October. It's part of a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and working conditions. Strikes are already set to go ahead on October the 1st and the 5th. Travel expert Simon Calder told GB News the strikes will challenge the new government.
So the RMT union is the crucial one because it's got an awful lot of members working for an awful lot of train operators, but it also has the signallers for Network Rail. And that's why when this strike happens on the 8th of October, just like the one on the 1st of October, there will be perhaps 1 in 5 trains running. And the idea is very much to keep the pressure on the new government, on the new Transport Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the death of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed in Huddersfield yesterday. An investigation has been launched after the teenager died in hospital following an attack close to the entrance of North Huddersfield Trust School. The head teacher says they've lost a wonderful student from their school community. The Prince and Princess of Wales have thanked volunteers and staff in Windsor supporting crowds during the Queen's funeral. It's their first public engagement since the Queen was laid to rest on Monday. Thousands of people lined the streets to see the state hearse make its way down the long walk. The royal family is observing an extended period of mourning until Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's over to Patrick.
OK, welcome back, everybody. It's just gone 8 minutes past 5. I'm with you all the way through until 6, and there's loads for us to get stuck into on GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. We are reacting to the big healthcare revolution. Well, is it really a revolution? As new Health Secretary Therese Coffey tries to make sure we can all see our GP within 2 weeks. I want to know whether or not GPs work hard enough. Is the NHS actually good enough? Will these plans, which include lobbing about 500 million quid at social care, actually work? I want to know your experiences. GBViews at gbnews.uk. They've been coming in thick and fast throughout the show. Lots of negatives, but a few positives along the line as well. Also this afternoon, it's been announced that the government's rise in national insurance will be reversed from the 6th of November. It comes after news that the Bank of England has raised interest rates to 2.25%, taking borrowing costs to their highest level since 2008. Most important stuff is whose quid's in, who's skint, who are the winners, who are the losers. I'll reveal all here on GB News Live. And how on earth, if indeed we can we get different communities to live together in harmony? No, I'm not going to sing Kumbaya. I'm going to actually ask the big questions, because extra police resources are being parachuted into Leicester to stop a repeat of this ridiculous intercommunal violence which erupted last weekend between Hindus and Muslims. I'm going to speak to social policy analyst and expert Rakiba Sam. We cannot have this continuing to happen on the streets of Britain, can we? We've got enough going on without that absolute nonsense. But let's get stuck straight in. Right, top of the bill this hour, Health Secretary has announced the government's winter plan to deal with the NHS. Measures have focused on GPs with a 5-step plan to allow all patients to be seen within 2 weeks. 1 million extra appointments will also be created so more patients can be seen on the same day. There's a lot to get stuck into here. I want to deal with it all in a wanna because basically, as far as I can tell, Therese Coffey has said here's 500 million quid for adult social care and at the same time just asked GPs to work harder. So there we go. But here's what she actually had to say in the House of Commons.
Patients are my top priority, and I will be their champion, focusing on the issues that most affect them or their loved ones. Most of the time, patients have a great experience, but we must not paper over the problems that we face. We expect backlogs to rise before they fall, as more patients come forward for diagnosis and treatment after the pandemic. And the data shows, sadly, that there is too much variation in the access and care people receive across the country.
Well, the NHS has become a political football, and Labour's shattered Health Secretary Wes Streeting was not impressed, and he offered this volley back.
It is a stark reminder that the pandemic is not over, that the new variant is a clear and serious risk to our public health, and of the urgency of getting Britain boosted and protecting us against this threat.
OK, well, I'm joined now by Dr Mo Karki, general practitioner from North London. Thank you very much, Dr Mo. Great to have you on the show. There wasn't a huge amount of substance from Therese Coffey there, it must be said. There were bits and bobs, but in terms of GPs, as far as I could tell anyway, what she was saying was, you just need to see more patients.
Well, it's interesting. I think Professor Marshall's statement this morning was quite conclusive, really, on this. I think what's happened is there's a lovely rhetoric that's come through of we need more appointments, we need to be seen, this is the big issue. But actually, sadly, the statistics count against what the Health Secretary said. 85% of people are seen within 2 weeks, and 44% are seen on the same day in general practice, which doesn't suggest that appointments are the burdening issue. What actually is one of the big issues is really the amount of staff we have, and particularly GPs, because GPs deal with really complex medical issues, and that can't just be done or solved by papering over the cracks with some of the proposals today.
Would it be fair to say that some GPs spend too much time working in the private sector? If they devoted all their time to the NHS, maybe that 85% of patients who get to see the GP within 2 weeks could get closer to 100%?
No, I don't think that would be fair at all. I think GPs work extremely hard, and I think NHS GPs are working to full capacity. And I think we've talked about this on previous shows where when we discuss a 10 or 12-hour day and we calculate that across 3 or 4 days, that is more than most people are working in a 40-hour week. So actually GPs are working extremely hard, and what they do outside of that time is for them to choose. But I think the key point here is focusing on what the Health Secretary said, because actually our issue here is we've been promised 6,000 GPs, but clearly that's not enough. And what we really need to focus is on retention of the current GPs and not trying to break their back by adding more work and adding expectations which are placed upon general practice without a substantial plan. We need to tackle the bureaucracy that is existing in general practice, and we also need to do things that are simple, upgrade IT systems and upgrade premises to incorporate more services in primary care.
Yeah, OK. I mean, some people are saying that actually for an average of around £112,000 a year, it would be expected maybe that there would be longer hours involved in that than maybe your average job, I suppose. I mean, does that not stack up? Maybe you would say that the pressure is too high, the pressure's a lot higher, you can't equate that with the money.
Sure, I think 7:30 in the morning till 6:30, 7:30 at night is pretty long hours. I'm not sure how much longer you want GPs to work,
3 days
how many
a week.
more days you can squeeze out. I think we need to be very careful in the way we conduct our conversations and look at our timings, because we're very clear to say that GPs come in early, they're doing their paperwork, they're looking at the data, they're looking at the results of patients, calling people before surgeries, then they conduct a surgery, then they'll do visits or other admin, and then they'll do an afternoon surgery. It's just that the time, of course, to see patients, maybe 3 or 4 hours, but of course within that, there's all these other things that need to be done as part of primary care. So I think we need to be really careful in how we utilise our time. But definitely, I know from my colleagues and myself, we're working very, very hard.
Yeah, how do we get more GPs then? Because, frankly, that would solve a huge amount of issues, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is one of the key things that we need to iron out. Now, the government's promised 6,000 GPs, but realistically, we know we need more. And I think what really needs to happen is we need a longer consultation with the primary care leaders. This statement from the Health Secretary team today was without consultation with Professor Marshall, head of the RCGP, without consultation with GPs. who are on the front line, who are doing this work and saying, well, how do we do this? Some of it is to do with how we alleviate some of the burdens on general practice. You know, it's a catch-all for all problems at the moment. And of course, there are welcome support from allied healthcare professionals, but we have to look at how we incentivize general practice and how we also retain our GPs rather than working them so hard that they feel they've got to explore other avenues or leave the NHS. So there's a combination there. I think one thing I would say is we do certainly share the frustration of the public. You know, I really wish I could see more, and I wish there was more capacity in the system. So really the key point here is more GPs, more capacity, patients can be seen quicker.
Look, I get all of that, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't put this to you. Recent surveys show that just over half of patients rated access to their GPs as good. When I look at claims, and this isn't just about GPs, this is the NHS as a whole, when it comes to medical negligence as well, billions and billions and billions of pounds being paid out for damages, for legal fees, for negligence claims as well. I mean, actually, if this was any other line of work, I'm not sure people would be able to pass the buck up, would they, to government? They'd have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, maybe we do need to do a better job.
I think that would be like a rudimentary review of it, really. That's taking out all the factors that add the pressure that lead to problems. You know, it's all well and good saying that GPs themselves have made an issue, but actually what you'll find is systems failures cause a lot of the concerns. Look, where there's mistakes, of course, I think GPs put their hands up, and one of our things we do every year is we go through an appraisal process, we're reviewed, we look at the issues and mistakes. Of course, that's done. But one thing that we know is if you overburden the system, if you add more pressures, if you increase targets to seeing everyone within 2 weeks and everyone within a day, without realistically supporting the system, you know that actually you're just making the system break. And we know that that has been a concern for a number of years from a number of the college chairs from the Royal College of GPs and has been expressed throughout the NHS. So, of course, that's an issue that really needs to be alleviated. And one of the ways to do that is to retain the staff who are amazing and working really hard. Some of the methods are to recruit more staff. And the final one is to invest more in the infrastructure and reduce the bureaucracy. And through those methodologies, I think we have a chance of saving the NHS.
Just a quick one as well, actually, and I don't think this gets asked often enough. Do you think sometimes patients expect a bit too much from their GP? It might be an unpopular question to state here, but do you end up with people coming and presenting themselves to you for something that they don't really need to see a doctor to? Do you think that people expect in some situations to see their GP far too quickly? They're not being realistic enough.
I think we love the fact that the NHS is free at the point of care, and it's an honour to serve patients as much as we can. And if you're worried about something, you know, I prefer you to come and let me know rather than sit on it and discover later that you had a cancer or you had something significant going on. I think there has to be some autonomy, there has to be some ability for us to look after ourselves and look after our families and communities as well, and that's something that we have to take on board as individuals, as patients in our own right as well, because that will support the system. And GPs want to see as many as we can, but we have to also remember that there is that challenge. So it's not an easy one, because we want patients to come forward, but we recognise that there are things that we can look after ourselves. I think statements like wider statements that state that you're going to be seen within 2 weeks, you're going to be seen within a day, doesn't add to the burden of expectation. And I think those are unhelpful, and we need to look at how we work together rather than trying to score points and appease the nation.
All right. Dr Mo, thank you very much. Dr Mo Kaki there, general practitioner from North London, just reacting and discussing the announcement, really, that Therese Coffey wants GPs to make sure they can see every single patient within 2 weeks, 1 day, if it's deemed serious enough. Lots of reaction to that. Daryl has been on already, says, I'm so sick of GPs blaming everything but themselves. But other people have been getting in touch, GBviews at gbnews.uk, saying that in their particular area, they actually have a good service. So a bit of a postcode lottery, but we're going to move away from that right now, because this afternoon, the Treasury has announced that the 1.25 percentage point rise in national insurance will be reversed from November the 6th. We're expecting more announcements from Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's rather large mini-budget, it must be said. Earlier today, the Bank of England also announced it will hike interest rates to their highest in more than 13 years and indicated that it believes the economy is already in recession. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee increased the base interest rate by 50 basis points from 1.75% to 2.25% in a bid to tackle high inflation. Let's speak to the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. It's Vicky Price. Are we all skint?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Are we all? I can hear you. Yes. Are we all going to get poorer?
Oh, is that what you are? So we're all skint. Absolutely. In terms of the interest rate increases, if that's what you mean. But of course, I think what the government is trying to do is make up for this by cutting taxes. So this national insurance contribution decline that we're going to see, or reversal, if you like, we're going to see announced tomorrow, is going to leave more money in people's pockets, but also more money in the pockets of employers. And if you remember, when the national insurance contribution rate was upped by Rishi Sunak, businesses were screaming about this because, of course, they felt it wasn't quite the right time to raise taxes, and that will be coming back to them. So that's a bit positive, both for consumers and, of course, for businesses.
Have we, for the first time in quite a long time, got a really big political divide when it comes to the economic setup between some people who think, right, we should go to growth and we should cut taxes and we should try to build a bigger cake and then everyone gets a bigger slice of it, or actually a lot of people who say, no, now is the time we need to basically be taxing things to high heaven, raise more money for the public purse, and people like you and I need to be paying for everything?
Well, the truth is, if you're having a slowing economy, it's very difficult to raise taxes, to do all the things that you want to do. You're probably going to have to go and borrow. So we are in that situation. We were in that situation during COVID. We were in that situation, of course, at the time of the financial crisis about 10 years ago. So we are, 12 years ago. So we are really looking at what is it that might perhaps prevent the economy from shrinking even more. You asked whether we were skinned. And the reality is that if there weren't any extra measures, such as the electricity price freeze, for example, we definitely would find that real living standards would be falling very, very substantially, and the economy would fall into deep recession, not just the small sort of decline in GDP we're likely to have seen this quarter and the one before, so we're falling into technical recession, but something much, much bigger, which would have reminded us of what was happening during COVID. And I think there has to be a reaction. Now, whether this tax cuts, rather than just reversals, if you like, extra tax cuts would make sense right now is a point that will be debated for quite some time. But frankly, we're in a crisis situation and we don't know.
OK, Vicky, thank you very much. Vicky Price there, of course, who is the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? It's a bit of a tough one, this. I can't help but feel as though at a time when, look, let's be honest, as a nation, we are skinned. People are calling for people who are private renters to not be evicted even if they can't pay their rent. We've got strikes. We had breaking news earlier on. In case you're just joining us, yep, the trains are on strike again. NHS, we need to throw more money at that. Foreign aid, I've got some notes here. Pretty much all public services, we're paying off furlough, we're paying off COVID. Where does all of this money come from? Maybe it really is time to go for growth. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But talking of that inbox, here is an issue that I know a lot of you have been delving into, and I'm going to get stuck into that shortly, and it's those violent clashes between Muslims and Hindus in Leicester. They've spread to another town in the West Midlands. How long will it be before they spread elsewhere as well? Shocking video footage from Tuesday night shows up to 200 masked men and hooded men gathered outside a Hindu temple shouting a well-known Muslim phrase. Next, I'll be asking, how can we get communities to live in harmony? And if we can't, what do we do about it? For all that, though, well, might be weather. We'll see.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Clashes between Muslims and Hindus in Leicester have spread almost 50 miles to Smethwick. Video footage from Tuesday night does show up to 200 masked and hooded men gathered at a Hindu temple shouting Allahu Akbar. Extra police resources have been drafted in now to stop any violence over the weekend, which is a rather shocking turn of events. They clearly expect it to continue. And as the unrest does carry on and seemingly spread, it does raise questions about how different communities in the UK can live in harmony with each other and avoid similar things going forward. But now we've got social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan on to talk about this very issue. Dr. Rakib, can I just say, one of the things that I think has been lost in all of this, potentially, has been the people who maybe come from a long line of people who live around the Birmingham or the Midlands area, who over the course of the last 20, 30, 40 years have seen their area change drastically, and now the culmination of essentially an argument that started on the subcontinent erupting in a street in Leicester. I mean, how must they be feeling? It's not great for integration, is it?
It's really not, Patrick, and I think this foreign-inspired sectarianism and ultra-religious identity politics, it poses a fundamental threat to social cohesion. You're talking about population change there. Understandably, there'll be people within the white British mainstream thinking that diversity is not as such our strength. I've always made the point that there are many migrants who have come to the UK, migrants of different faiths and ethnicities and races, who have contributed a great deal to the social, cultural and economic life of Britain. But we really need to challenge those who have an uncritical view of diversity. The reality of the matter is, unless the country successfully ties that diversity in terms of shared values, common obligations to one another, then it can unravel very quickly, Patrick.
It does, and that serves only to completely defeat the idea that it might ever work. And one of the problems that I have is that it can be seen as being racist to say, can we just slow it down? One of the arguments might be, we're not against immigration as a whole, we're not against different cultures coming in, moving into a particular area, But maybe we should slow that down a bit to make sure that integration is done correctly. Is it too much too quickly?
Well, I think firstly, it's not racist to say that there are drawbacks to cultural diversity. That's the truth of it. And secondly, I don't think it's racist to suggest that current immigration levels are too high. As I've written over the course of the week, in light of the Leicester disorders, I am somewhat concerned by the radical ideological beliefs which may be held by some newly arrived subcontinental migrants. As you know, Patrick, not all is well in South Asia. India increasingly is becoming a hotbed of Hindutva ideology, Hindu fundamentalism. Pakistan's problems with Islamist extremism is well documented. It is a fragile state. So it is a reasonable view to hold that recent waves of immigration may possibly have a negative impact on community relations.
Is it becoming harder to make the case for mass migration, do you think?
Oh, I don't think there ever was a case, was there? I think that if you want to live in an advanced, successful, multiracial, ethnically diverse democracy, you need a restrictive and streamlined immigration system. I've always said that if any British citizen is supportive of maximising social cohesion and public security, they should be also supportive of a streamlined immigration and asylum system.
It's very difficult, though, isn't it, when one would imagine there's a huge amount of community pressure that maybe emanates from a nucleus of more radical or extreme or fundamentalist elements within that community that can easily seep out. And then it's almost like peer pressure, isn't it? And all of a sudden, if you've got 10 of your mates who might be particularly offended about something and they're going to go and protest outside a temple or outside a mosque or in some form of community, it's easy for that to spread, isn't it? And it's hard to combat that, is it?
It is very difficult to combat. I thought one of the problems with the Leicester disorders was that the local police force seemed ill-equipped to cope with that. I'm glad to see there's more inter-force policing, and that's needed because one of the main problems with the Leicester disorders was the arrival of out-of-town troublemakers coming into Leicester, reportedly from major cities such as London and Birmingham. Of course, there will be peer pressure, but I think that's where you do need, within particular communities, those anti-extremist voices to say that we need to do away with those with this tribalism and this sectarianism, which has no place in Britain.
Are there enough of those? Sorry, just quickly, Dr. Keefe, sorry about this. I'm getting shouted at horrendously in my ear because we've got to do a thing called the headlines. But are there enough of those voices in communities? Because that's the big criticism as well of people. Yes, people shouldn't have to justify the actions of a few, right? That's unequivocal. But at the same time, are there enough people within that community willing to stick their head above the parapet and say, hang on now, enough's enough, stop this?
Well, I think there needs to be more voices because when it comes to this kind of foreign-inspired sectarianism and communal intimidation, it has no place in Britain, and I'd like to see more voices speak against it.
Dr. Rakib, thank you very, very much. Sorry, I could talk to you all day about this, but we'll have to do it again some other time. Dr. Rakib stand there, thank you very, very much. Social policy analyst. Well, without further dither and delay, very shortly I will be going to the news, but not before I've told you what's coming up, because are Brexiteers more patriotic than Remainers? A new poll certainly suggests so. We're going to be getting stuck right into all of that. What does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to you? GB Views at gbnews.uk. But yes, it is now. The headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5:33. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary has described Russia's attack on Ukraine as an attack on the world. James Cleverly made the comments at the United Nations Security Council. He also called on countries to reject the charade of referenda due to be held in Russian-controlled regions in eastern and southern Ukraine.
We know what Vladimir Putin is doing. He is planning to fabricate the outcome of those referenda. He is planning to use that to annex sovereign Ukrainian territory. And he is planning to use it as a further pretext to escalate his aggression. We stand with our Ukrainian friends for as long as it takes, because Ukraine's fight for freedom is the world's fight for freedom. It is our fight for freedom.
The Bank of England has raised the interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to 2.5% as it seeks to curb soaring inflation. The central bank expects a 0.1% fall in GDP over the current quarter, indicating it believes the country is already in a recession. The Chancellor has announced the rise in national insurance implemented under Boris Johnson is to be cancelled later this year. The increase of 1.25%, which came into force in April, will be reversed this November. In a tweet, Kwasi Kwarteng called the measure a tax cut for workers. The government has unveiled a £500 million fund for NHS winter care. Under the reforms, the Health Secretary Therese Kofi has pledged patients with urgent needs will be able to see a GP on the same day. Those who want to book non-urgent appointments will be seen by a doctor within 2 weeks. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick's back in a moment. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.126 and €1.144, and the price of gold currently stands at £1,484 and 94 pence per ounce.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Right, we've got an action-packed end to this show. You're not going to want to miss the final two topics that we've got. But just before I get stuck into them, some of your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk, because we are the People's Channel, of course. So, people are getting in touch, mostly about their GP appointments, or lack of in some cases. Linda says, I was a GP's receptionist for 10 years. I can't believe that the public think the receptionists have the power to give out appointments. The appointments are agreed each day by the GPs, etc., etc. Yes, there we go. Thank you very much. Daniel's been on. We need to incentivise GPs to do more hours for the NHS and less private work. They get a good wedge of the pie. Yes, just quickly on that one, Daniel, part of the problem potentially could be the amount that they earn because, yes, I know this will be unpalatable to people, if they earn an average of about 112 grand a year, when you start doing overtime on that, it can push you into an even higher tax bracket. You can get taxed about 70% on that. And then that's why some people have a bit of a problem working those extra hours. But Michelle says the NHS should stop wasting thousands on diversity managers and use that money to employ more frontline staff. Interesting stuff. Right, so now we do like to do a little bit of patriotism here. Of course we do on GB News. And a new survey has found that attitudes towards Brexit can still produce sharp divisions on questions of patriotism and identity. So the National Centre for Social Research found that more than 60% of Brexiteers consider themselves to be strongly British, compared with about 30% of Remainers. And similarly, over 50% of Brexiteers agreed that Britain is better than other countries, hardly a shock, which is double the figure for Remainers. So, are Brexit supporters more patriotic? To discuss this, we shamelessly decided to pitch a Brexiteer and a Remainer against each other. You love to see it. I'm joined by Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK, and Gareth Kearns, who's an EU-supporting protester. I'll start with you, Gareth, because you have come rather on brand straight from a protest, I believe, haven't you? So, are you patriotic about Britain?
Yes.
How?
Well, let's just define it. Patriotism, you'd agree, is about loving your country, wanting the best for your country, being concerned about its security and prosperity. I think we'd all accept that's a baseline, yes?
Yeah, that's probably loosely speaking correct, yes.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I have opposed Brexit, and because it's about the security, prosperity of my country, and also in accordance with the traditions that I've grown up with. I had two grandfathers who served in the Second World War. I want to continue in what they won.
All right, Richard, I'll let you come back to that then. Are Brexiteers actually the true patriots here?
I think you've just got to be, Patrick. Sorry.
Yes.
I think the reality is I want everybody who lives in the United Kingdom to be patriotic, to feel that they are hugely British. And in a sense, that's what we should aspire to. The issue of security and prosperity, in my view, we're much more secure and we will be much more prosperous having left the European Union. I'm very glad, and I was delighted to see the footage you used there. I was on the stage at that very moment. So look, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think this government's been very bad at taking advantage of the opportunity. But look, all of us who live in this this great nation, hopefully we're all patriotic. We all want the best for our country, and that's what democracy is about. It's about finding the best and the right solutions. And in my view, the best solution is Brexit.
OK, all right, Gareth, some of those figures that I wheeled out earlier were saying that more Brexiteers think Britain is basically better than other countries. Where do you think Britain ranks in terms of other countries? Because that's a trope, isn't it, about some Remainers, that they actually think every other foreign country is better than ours, pretty much.
I don't rank countries. That would be a silly thing to do. I mean, let's engage with this like adults.
Well, it's the point, though, isn't it? Do you think Britain's a better place to live than many other places around the world?
I do, but it is because I'm British. This country made me. I fit here. I would always be happier here than I would be anywhere else. I know that.
But you would be all right with us led by foreign leaders?
No.
It's not a bit about what the EU is about?
No. It is a coming together of, a collegiate coming together of nations, and there's an awful lot of compromise between them. But ultimately, if we weren't a sovereign nation, we wouldn't have been able to leave. It's as simple as that. That was the ultimate expression of our sovereignty. We left.
OK, Richard, you've heard what Gareth had to say there. Do you want to just come back to any of that?
No, actually, Gareth is right that those of us who've, essentially we live in Britain, we've been brought up in Britain. Of course, most of us would think that Britain is a great country. I think, I'm not sure it's a great question, that, Patrick, because the truth is, whether you live in France or Germany, if you've grown up there, the chances are you think that's the greatest country in the world. And in a sense, that's the definition of patriotism in every nation. And that's wonderful. I'm a great believer in it. I think, we want people to believe in independent sovereign states. And that's a very powerful thing, and I'm hugely supportive of it.
Well, that's interesting. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion, actually, Richard, because for some people, they would say that one of the definitions of patriotism is being desperate to go it alone and have total control of your own affairs. But that doesn't seem to be what a lot of Remainers wanted, by definition, I suppose. So, Richard, for you, is that a key cornerstone of what it means to be a patriot, to basically be in control of your own destiny, I suppose?
I think it's a belief in your own sovereign state and who you are as a people. But it's the point about a sovereign state is you can decide what you do independently on your own, but you can also decide where you want to work together with other nations in order to achieve a particular goal. The point is, it's your country's choice from your democratically elected leaders. That's the whole point of independent sovereignty, and that's what you lose when you accept the compromises of the European Union.
Gareth?
But no nation is absolutely sovereign, because if you have a whole bunch of sovereign nations together, they all have to compromise, and they all have to have a thing, well, we're going my way now, we're going my way now, and that is not... You do not have absolute sovereignty. The absolute sovereign nation, or at least the nearest thing we have to the absolute sovereign nation on this planet right now, is North Korea. It ignores everyone else. We don't want to be that. Who would want to be that? You have to work together.
But just to come back to that, Gareth, I mean, Britain obviously voted for Brexit, and we have not become North Korea, have we?
Well, we haven't achieved Brexit either.
But you've got to concede that no matter, even if the most extreme version of Brexit, Gareth, we would not be led by Kim Jong-un.
Because we would not live up to the maxims that Richard has gone into there. We would not have that degree of sovereignty. We wouldn't have it. It would not be attained.
Right, OK, fair enough, in a sense. Richard, did you think, though, that there was a bit of an outpouring from some of the Remain crowd? I'll put this to you in a second, Gareth, by the way, but about the fact that it went from being, OK, not just the fact that we had left the Brussels bloc, as it were, but I noticed, I certainly detected a lot of people despairing, a lot of people talking this country down, saying, oh, we're going to be Little England now. Basically, by my metric there, saying that they thought we were much better off with some kind of foreign leadership because we couldn't really handle it on our own.
I think there was a fair degree of that, actually, Patrick. But I think it's all about confidence. It's about confidence in one's own country's ability to run one's own affairs. And look, I'm very critical of some of the ways some things are run, but at least, we the people, because ultimately we're sovereign, we lend that sovereignty to our elected officials, and they either do a good job or a bad job of running the country. Gareth's right, you then choose where you want to compromise, but at least it's our choice on what you compromise with other nations. My issue with Brussels was that you didn't have a choice about it. They chose, you had to do it.
Gareth, are you more inclined to fly the EU flag outside your house or the Union flag?
Well, I don't fly any flag outside my house, but when I protest...
Got a Ukrainian one on your chest now.
That is for, you'll agree, particular and special reasons. But when I fly flags, which I do fly flags outside Westminster, I fly 3 flags. Actually, these days, I fly 4, I've just realised, because you're right, there's the Ukrainian one. There's the Union flag, Union flag, there's the EU flag, and I'm Welsh, so the dragon.
OK, well, that's interesting, isn't it? That is fascinating. By the way, we haven't got time to get stuck into this, lads, but Wales is a fascinating case study of receiving quite a lot more, I think, of EU funds than other parts of the UK, and then voting the most strongly for independence.
Although you'll be aware of the study that was done by Oxford University that found that the indigenous Welsh, if you like, they voted to remain. It was tipped by all of those English retirees we have taking our cottages. That tipped the balance.
OK, just quickly, Gareth, and then I'll throw it over to you, Richard. Very quickly here, chaps. We've not got long left. Gareth, would you rather see the UK fail now to prove your point that Brexit didn't work? Or would you actually be happy to see us prosper in a post-Brexit Britain?
If you can make it happen, you make it happen.
What would you personally rather? Would you rather be right?
If I'm a patriot, I would prefer that we prosper. I simply cannot see a model that makes that happen. That's the problem. You present a model that makes that happen, because it ain't looking good right now.
Richard?
You make that happen, that's fine.
All right, that was Gareth Kearns there. Richard, come back to that then, because I think that's a lot of what certain people were thinking anyway, which is that maybe Remainers who lost would rather see Britain burn than it succeed so that they'd be proved right.
Actually, I hope and pray that they don't. We want to prosper. We want to make a huge success of it. The Tories so far have been, frankly, pretty bungling and incompetent at it. But the opportunity is there. It's a huge opportunity. We've got to go for it. And let's see what they say tomorrow. Cutting taxes, cutting daft EU regulation, putting the foot on the accelerator of growth, and we can be awesome, fantastic.
That's a dogmatic and ideologic, that's not got anything to do with how reality works. You do need to pay taxes.
Go on, Richard, final word, then you've had 2 final words.
If you cut taxes, you get more growth. It's proven around the world. It's called the Laffer curve. It's basic economics.
All right, chaps, that's enough. I'm going to have to ring a boxing bell here, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And, yeah, good stuff. I enjoyed that a lot, actually. Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, and Gareth Kearns as well, who's an EU supporting protester. Well, I think we kind of decided there that maybe both of those people were quite patriotic, which renders the Guardian study a little bit useless. But hey, there you go, good talking point. Moving on to another good talking point now. We like to do a lot of highbrow stuff here at GB News Live. We really like to elevate the conversation and move things forward in a progressive and intellectual manner. Are vegans going to stop having sex with meat eaters? That's right, an animal rights group has said that women should impose a sex ban on men who eat meat. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I won't make it. Because they are responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions. Peter's German branch has pleaded for women to force abstinence on meat-eating men in order to save the world. The comments have caused outrage in Germany, with many arguing that people who choose to eat meat should not be denied the opportunity to reproduce. Joining me now is the Senior Digital Campaigns Officer at Peter. It's Chelsea Munro. Chelsea, are vegans going to put a sex ban on meat-eating men, really?
Well, look, this was a tongue-in-cheek suggestion designed to make men sit up and take notice of a very important issue. There is a recent study that does show that men are responsible for 41% more climate emissions than women. And that's a big, big difference. And so really we want to draw attention to this issue to men and encourage everyone to go vegan. And Peter aren't alone in this plea. The United Nations are calling for a reduction in meat consumption too, to curb the worst effects of climate change. And really, it's a simple ask. You know, it's just next time you reach for a sausage roll, grab a vegan sausage roll instead. So it's got all of the taste, but none of the effects on climate change, and spares animal a terrifying trip to the abattoir too.
OK, all right. Just on that thing of was it meat-eating men produce more carbon emissions than vegans? Is that right, or than women, or just than women? Is it?
Yes, so men produce 41% more climate emissions than women.
Can I just ask quickly on that? Sorry.
Diets, so.
Yeah, sorry, but just on that, is that not because men, by and large, are physically bigger and therefore consume more generally?
It is largely due to the meaty diets, which is the biggest contribution to climate change. Of course, we want everyone to go vegan, not just men. So this does apply to men and women. But obviously, this study came out about men consuming more meat and therefore having a bigger impact on the environment.
Some would say this is the most totalitarian thing you could possibly do. Deny meat-eating men the opportunity to reproduce, to push a big vegan avocado-infused agenda.
Well, honestly, I don't care about the sex lives of men or anybody for that matter. And, if this is the kind of activism and that you want to do to encourage more veganism, more vegan diets, then that's great. But really, the only thing that we kind of care about, and the most important thing here, is lessening the effect on climate change and sparing animals that trip to the abattoir as well. I care about this, but I do care about the environment, and I do care about animals. And I do think that people need to be considerate of their diet, because, if they were aware of the things that happened in slaughterhouses, piglets' tails being cut off without painkillers and so on, I do think most people would be vegan anyway.
OK, all right, just very lastly, if you'll excuse the pun here, part of running a campaign supposedly is to turn people onto it, and this by definition is going to turn people off, isn't it?
Great pun there. I think that really what we want to do is just spark a discussion, and I think it's worked. I mean, we're all here, we're sat down,
we are talking about it. We are.
So it's sparking the discussion, and that's the key thing really, is just to get people talking about their impact on the environment and how they could reduce that. And, Oxford University have had studies showing that a vegan diet is the best way to reduce your impact on climate change. So I think, as long as people are talking about it and they're thinking about their actions, that's the most important thing. And if anybody listening has, thought things through, they can go to peter.org.uk and try our vegan starter kit to get going.
There you go. Cheeky little plug at the end as well. Thank you very much, Chelsea. Chelsea Munro there is the Senior Digital Campaigns Officer at Peter. Will you be going vegan? Will you be banning your other half from sex if they don't go vegan. Well, we'll have to wait and see on that front, won't we? But up next, it's Jubes & Co. with the wonderful Michelle Dewberry, who is here in the studio. Michelle, what have you got coming up for us?
Hello, Patrick. Yes, the NHS. I mean, goodness me, how on earth are we going to fix it? Apparently, the new answer is A, B, C, D. That's all about ambulances, backlogs, care, doctors and dentists. I personally would have added 2 more on the end of that, PR, personal responsibility. But I wonder, is today's latest plan the one to fix the NHS? And we're all apparently anxious and getting more so, Patrick, right? So what is the answer to this? An expert panel in the States apparently have cracked it. They reckon you should screen all under 65-year-olds for anxiety disorders. I say, why don't we just start teaching people resilience and things like that? That might help get to the bottom of some of this. What else have I got coming up for you? Oh, yes, PayPal. Should a company be able to cancel your services with them, basically because they don't like your views? I say, no.
Yeah, that's mad. That's mad. Sorry, I had to interrupt you, because that is absolutely bonkers, actually, isn't it, Michelle? But thank you very much, Michelle. That sounds like yet another box office show. Great to have the little preview there. Thank you very much, everybody who's been tuning into GB News Live as we've jettisoned you into the world of GB News Prime Time. I hope you have a fabulous evening. I've enjoyed every second of this. I'll be back with more box office stuff later on tomorrow. See you at 3 p.m, people.
Hi there, Aidan McGibbon here with the latest weather from the Met Office. Rain clearing south during the next 24 hours with a few showers following, but actually for many, Friday's looking brighter compared with Thursday. A cold front has brought some wet weather to northern England and parts of Wales during Thursday. That's now making some progress southeastwards. Slow progress, but it is shifting. And as a result, clearing skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England through the evening. A few showers following for the north and west of Scotland and Northern Ireland, otherwise lengthy clear spells. But for the southern half of the UK, that's where the rain ends up. It turns more showery, but with a lot of cloud around, 13 or 14 Celsius, a mild start to Friday. Not so much the case for the northern half of the UK. Here, single figures and 1 or 2 fog patches first thing, especially for parts of northern England and southern Scotland. They'll get out of the way around mid-morning, and then sunny spells for much of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers developing fairly widely, I think, but the brighter skies do inch southwards into central parts of the UK. We keep the showery rain in the southeast, though, for much of the day. Some heavy bursts at times, and that'll make it feel much cooler than it's felt during the last few days. Temperatures 18 or 19 Celsius. Further heavy showers to come during Friday evening towards the southeast corner. And elsewhere, there'll be 1 or 2 showers, primarily towards western coasts, as well as the North Sea coast. Otherwise, lengthy clear spells and temperatures dipping fairly widely into the single figures, perhaps mid-single figures in some sheltered spots. So certainly a fresh start to the weekend, but